Hey y'all, it's Ashley at Bookish Realm, and I am back here with day number 22 of Vlogmas. So we are coming to an end, and it's been a heck of a journey. I have absolutely enjoyed this, every second of it. It has challenged me in ways I didn't expect, and I am super proud of myself for having made it this far. As always, like I've been saying in these past few videos, I appreciate the support from y'all. It means so much to me, for the people who are watching and commenting, and those of you who are like, you know, I can only watch a couple. That's fine. Like, absolutely nothing wrong with that. Like I always say, it's a lot of content. 25 videos back to back to back. Like, it's a lot. It's a lot on me, so I know it's a lot on y'all as well. All right, so what we're gonna do today is we're doing another best of list. Of course, are we surprised? We shouldn't be surprised. I think that over the next few days, you're gonna be seeing more of these categories. And so for this one, we are gonna be talking a little bit about my top science fiction, fantasy, thriller, and mystery books of 2020. Now, I decided to lump all of these together because I didn't read enough in each one of these genres this year in order to make them their own specific category. So I thought maybe I would just put them all together, like it would just work that way. So what we're going to be talking about first is the song choice for today, which just happens to be Wizards in Winter by the Trans-Siberian Orchestra, which I thought would be a good fit because, you know, when we say wizards, we think I was about to say we think science fiction. We really don't think science fiction. We think fantasy. So I thought that this would be a good point of using it for this specific video. So let's go ahead and jump right in and talk a little bit about the song. So Wizards in Winter is an instrumental track by the Trans-Siberian Orchestra. It was released in 2004 on their album The Lost Christmas Eve. So the first few seconds, which I did not know this, was actually used in a commercial for the band's most recent concert tour, and it is often used to open their live shows. It has been a minute since I've actually listened to this song, but I think that they're known for one other specific track, which I can't even remember off the top of my head. So the musical style for this one is usually categorized as progressive rock, symphonic metal, and heavy metal, with some influences from classical music. All right, y'all, so let's go ahead and jump right in. So the first book that I have on this list for the SFF thriller mystery, and I forgot to say that there's a couple of horror included in this as well. So the first one that we're going to be going with is Escaping Exodus by Nikki Drayden, and this was actually the book that prompted me to want to dive more into science fiction. And it was so crazy because I think I've read science fiction before, but it just made me have like this urge to want to read more science fiction than I had been reading at any other point in my life. And it focuses on these group of beings, which I won't even go into specifics about what they are because that's actually tied to the plot, and they actually inhabit this space beast in which they live off of the innards of this space beast, meaning like they set up, for lack of a better term, shop within the actual inside of this beast, and they keep it running themselves, and that's the way that they survive. And we are looking at this from two different perspectives. One is from a main character that is the descendant of the queen of this community, which is actually a matriarchal community, and then the other is from her companion slash possible love interest. So there is some sapphic elements in this. This has great queer rep in it, and we get to see kind of their two perspectives about how this society is functioning, and we see their relationship grow, fall apart, and I'm not going to say where it goes from there, but it definitely is an interesting book, especially with some of the elements that are incorporated into it and how we function as a society, what society may have looked like as a matriarchal society. And we honestly get to know a lot about our two characters, and you either love them or you hate them, to be honest. But this had to be included for me because it was just just one of those books where I was like, oh my gosh, like I think I like science fiction. And it's not that I don't think I've ever not liked science fiction, but this introduced me to a part of science fiction that I don't think I was as familiar with, and really opened up my eyes to see what the possibilities are, specifically with this genre. And I really enjoyed and loved that so much. So this is definitely one of my top SFF reads for the year. And actually what ended up happening is that I was part of a live show with Erica, Bree, Harley, and Chloe. The 5 of us ended up doing a live show for this book specifically. I can't even remember whose channel it's on. I feel like it was on Chloe's channel. But I could be so wrong about that. I think it was, because I don't think it was on my channel. But either way, comes in here trying to figure out whose channel they would do it on. I'll make sure I link that live show in the card symbol above, so be sure to definitely check that out. Why I have a pen, I don't know. Just don't mind me, okay? Don't mind me at all. The next one that I have on this list is Raybearer by Jordan E. Fuego. Everybody's probably like, oh my gosh, this didn't make your top 20 of 2020. It did not. There were a lot of other SFF books that I had to pick from, or I had to decide with, especially in the fantasy realm. There was a little bit more for me to choose from, and this came down between this book and another book, and the other book made the top 20. But I really did enjoy Raybearer, and it definitely was a top read for me in 2020, and I am excited to read the second book. And this, I think a lot of people have heard me talk about Raybearer quite a bit, and I actually have done a full review of Raybearer on my channel, which I'll make sure I also link in the card symbol. But we follow this young woman by the name of Terasai, and I think I talked about this also in my Vlogmas video, in which I was talking about books that I want to reread in 2021. And she is being raised by this individual called the Lady, who is supposedly her mother, and she is raising her to infiltrate the Princess Council, and they are connected by this source that is a Raybearer connection. And I don't want to explain explicitly like what that connection is and what it does and how it happens, because it's very much so a part of the magic system of this book. But what I loved about this is that I think I just never saw where this book was going at any point in time. I think any conceptions that I may have had about where the plot was going was completely destroyed by what I was seeing in the text and what would actually end up happening. I think the character development was really good. The magic system was really good, and it was just a really intriguing book in the sense that I was so into it. And there are a lot of morally gray characters that are part of Raybearer, and I did not think that I was a fan of morally gray characters, but I am. And I did not realize that until I met a character in this book that is explicitly morally gray. And I just ended up really just enjoying that contrast of like, well, are they really bad or are they really good with just some, you know, maybe messed up intentions? I don't know. But definitely a top read of 2020. As I've always said, I can't wait to dive into this in 2021. I'll make sure, like I said before, to leave that review up in the card symbol above. The next one that I had to add on this list that I actually read earlier this year, and it's one of these books that I was like, almost forgot whether I had read it in 2020 or whether I had read it in 2019. Well, I read it in 2020, and it is Pet by Akwaeke Emezi. And let me tell y'all something. This is a difficult book, and one that I don't think I was mentally prepared for prior to reading it, because I don't think I knew exactly what it was covering. And I don't want to delve too much into what it is about, because of the fact that a lot of it does deal with spoilery information. But it focuses on a young girl by the name of Jam and her best friend Redemption, who have grown up now in society where all monsters have supposedly been eradicated by angels, and there are no more monsters, and they're supposed to be living in this perfect world. And there is definitely this question of, what do monsters truly look like? And there is a monster that has come back or has been present, and there is this being, animal, creature thing called pet that comes to let Jam know that there is a monster that does exist in Redemption's household. And what's so interesting about this is that I think that Okweke does a great job of discussing some heavy topics in this fantastical environment, and brings forth some great conversation about the word monster and how we view monsters and what monsters truly look like. And this has definitely great queer rap. We have Jam, who is trans, and it was a situation in which she said that she was trans to her parents, and there was just no huge discussion about it. They were okay. And I believe that Redemption's parents are in a polyamorous relationship. So there's great queer rap just as a part of the story. It's not a story necessarily that heavily focuses on that, but my goodness, such a powerful book to be such a short book. And I believe this is the only work that I've read by Okweke, which unfortunately I need to. I have their adult book that just came out this year. I have that on audio, so I need to listen to that. But this is one that I do anticipating. I didn't include this in my reread list for 2021, but I do feel like this is one that I do need to reread, because I originally listened to it on audio, but I feel like I need to reread it physically. But this is one that I also need to mentally prepare myself for at the same time. The next one that I have on this list is actually a horror book, and that is The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. Such a phenomenal book, and my first introduction to Stephen Graham Jones as a horror writer. And of course, as a lot of people know, The Only Good Indians focuses specifically on this group of 4 men who have done some horrible thing, which I'm trying to tread very carefully on a lot of these topics, because I think that explaining too much into it sometimes is a spoiler. But it's 4 men who do something 10 years prior to the beginning of this book, something that is harmful, and there is this entity that comes to avenge their acts that they committed. And this book is not only about that revenge type of atmosphere going on in a horror book, it also looks definitely at the treatment of the native communities by different entities, including the police and the media. It has this great conversation about the balancing and value of looking at both old traditions and trying to foster new traditions and create your own path. And then there's also this conversation about, which is super important to the book, the conversation about the importance of basketball to the Native community, and how Stephen Graham Jones uses that to negate in some ways what happens when a woman is the final one standing in like a horror movie or a horror book. And I thought that that was really interesting, because I know that there had been some talk and discussions about like why basketball was so important to the narrative of this book. And when you look deeply into it, you learn why basketball is so important to the Native community. And then there's also an NPR article out there where Stephen Graham Jones, he talks specifically about why he used that element and why it was important to the very ending of this novel. But I thought it was well written. I thought sometimes that the pacing was a little off, and it did take me a while to get into it. I think that this is one of these books where you have to move through it slowly. It's not like I'm gonna fly through this book and I'm gonna retain and see everything. Like, I had to start this book over, I believe 2 or 3 times before I actually got a grasp of what was going on. And then from there on out, like, I took it very slow. And I listened to this on audio, but I never went higher than 1.25 speed, which is very abnormal for me in terms of audiobook listening. But there were so many elements, which I'm sure plenty of elements that flew completely over my head, but so many elements that Stephen Graham Jones tied into this book that I think were just important to the overall narrative of this story, and also to the Native community. And I believe that this was written specifically about Blackfeet, if I'm not mistaken. If I'm wrong about that, please let me know, but I believe that's specifically what he, like the group that he was writing about, because Stephen Graham Jones is Blackfeet, but I can't remember off the top of my head, not about him, but whether that the representation in this book was also Blackfeet. But if I'm wrong, please correct me in the comments. But I really love this book. I thought it was phenomenal. I still haven't finished Night of the Mannequins by Stephen Graham Jones, which is super unfortunate, but I will be finishing that up next year. That one I think is scaring me a little bit more than I anticipated, and it got to a point where I was like, okay, I need to put this down because it's freaking me out, and I never picked it back up, but I do need to pick it back up relatively soon. The next one that I have on this list is Winter Counts by David Heska Wanblee Whedon. Had to look down to make sure I got his name right. And this is one that just released. I read this one in November for Indigathon, and Winter Counts is a mystery slash thriller, but it circles around a character by the name of Virgil, who is kind of a mercenary. Like, he takes care of a lot of issues that happen on the res. And this one was interesting because it contains a drug element that I think I wasn't necessarily used to seeing within thrillers or mysteries. I don't think I've read much, but it has a lot to deal with the drug, I don't want to say drug ring, but drug dealing, just the movement and transporting and introduction of drugs to communities, specifically Native communities, and the specific drug in this is heroin. And we see him go through this process of trying to figure out exactly like where it's coming from after it kind of hits close to home for him. And wow. So the way that the last part of this book plays out is one where I kind of saw some parts of it coming, and then other parts of it I was like, wait, what? Like, what? So if you're like into those mystery and thriller books that have you probably within like the last 10% of the book, your heart racing, and you're kind of like, oh my gosh, what's about to happen? Like, this is the book for you. I think too that this book definitely does a great job of introducing how Native communities have or really don't have a relationship with the federal government in terms of like policing, because they as a community are not allowed to handle certain crimes, and they're not allowed to prosecute certain crimes, and those crimes then have to be passed on to the feds. And the lack of initiative and caring that takes place on their end, not the Native community, but like the federal government and the police, the feds, is amazing. Not amazing in a good way, but it's just dumbfounding how little care is invested in Native communities in terms of assisting in policing communities and prosecuting crimes, and a lot of things just end up not happening because they have no interest in prosecuting and they don't care enough to prosecute. And it talks a lot about how Native women end up treated because of the fact that things are not prosecuted and handled the way that they're supposed to be handled, and then you take the right away from the Native communities in order to police their own communities and prosecute their own communities. And it was a complex book in that way. It definitely had a lot of layers, and it was a thriller that I really enjoyed. And I just now this year started reading a little bit more thrillers than what I typically read, and I did really enjoy this one. The next one that I have on this list is a huge chunker of a thriller that I read at the beginning of the year, and I feel like this one got a lot of buzz maybe towards the end of last year, the beginning of this year, and then the world fell apart, and I feel like a lot of people just forgot about it, rightfully so. But it is the Chestnut Man, and I'm not going to even embarrass myself by attempting to pronounce the author's name because I know that I'm going to get it wrong, and I have looked up how to say it, and I just can't get it. So if you're willing to help me, please help me out. But this author also does writing for, I believe, a crime show or like a crime thriller show as well. So I wasn't surprised by some of the stuff that I was seeing within the context of this book. So this specifically focuses on a serial killer whose calling card is a chestnut man. What ends up being so crazy about this is that a chestnut man is actually found, and what ends up happening is that the thumbprint of a girl who was kidnapped a year prior to this specific event. Her fingerprint is on the chestnut, which is like, how does that happen where the young girl who's kidnapped, her fingerprints are on the calling card of a serial killer that has left this near a like torn up body, for lack of a better term, because I don't even want to get into the specifics of like how graphic and gritty this book is, and it definitely is a graphic and gritty book. I mean, there were times, because I listened to this on audio, but there were times when I was like, yeah, I'm gonna need to pause and take my headphones out, because the accuracy of the descriptions, the clarity of the descriptions, and how the bodies were kind of set up after the serial killer came in and did what they did was crazy. Now, this focuses on two specific detectives who have very different ways of handling this case, but what I liked about it is I felt like they had a way of balancing each other out, and there are parts of this book that are a little bit more nuanced. It's kind of dry in some areas, but for the most part it is so good. That ending was crazy. I mean, it's crazy. It was so crazy, it didn't even make any sense how crazy that ending was. I was shocked by that ending. Completely shocked by that ending. Did not see that coming at all. So if you're looking for like a grittier thriller with this crazy behind ending, I definitely would recommend checking out the Chestnut Man. It is a hefty book. It is translated. It's over 500 pages, but it was great, and definitely one of the best reads of 2020 for me personally. The next one that I have on this list is Daughters of Jubilation, and this is so good. This was such a good book, and I wish that more people, once again, I keep going, I wish more people would read this book, I wish more people would read this book. And I think that quite a few people now have added it to like their TBR, which is great. But I wish that the marketing behind this book would have been pushed a little bit more, because it is such a great book. It focuses on a young girl who specifically has these powers, and she knows that they are powers that are passed down from generation to generation, called the Jube, and they are responsible for doing some stuff. And I don't even want to say, once again, I'm going back to like, I don't want to tell you too much, because that's part of the element of reading the book, is figuring out some of this stuff. But it does take place in the 1960s, Jim Crow era, and it does tackle some aspects of Jim Crow. But I will always say, like, going into this book, this is not a book that is magical in the way that you think it is. It is magical, but it's the magic's purpose. It's not what you think it's for. But it was a very sex positive book. I think that this book was well written. I think that it definitely had a lot to offer in terms of character development and how we see our main character try to develop and handle her powers. There is a certain element of this book that completely made me fall apart and cry at the end of the book, which, if you know me, you know that it takes a lot for me to cry when reading books, and this one made me bawl like a child at the end, because and I can't really say whether it was like tears of joy or whether I was sad. It was just kind of a mixture of both going on there. But it definitely ended in a way also where I'm hoping that maybe we could possibly get something else, either set in this world or following the storyline or something. I really would like that. But if you haven't checked out Daughters of Jubilation, I would definitely recommend checking it out, and don't take it as a light fantasy. It's not a light fantasy. These individuals that have the Jube are fighting some evil powers, and the evil powers are a lot more human than what you would anticipate. And the last one that I have on this list is When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole. So this is an interesting thing. So I would say that The Only Good Indians is the only horror book on this list. However, I don't personally believe that The Only Good Indians is the only horror book. I know that When No One Is Watching, it says a thriller across the book. It says that Alyssa Cole has made a statement that this is a thriller. However, and I'm not saying this to go against her, I read this as a horror book, and it flowed a lot better for me when I read it that way. I appreciated it a lot more when I viewed it through the lens of a horror as opposed to a thriller. And I know that may not have necessarily been the attempt, but it explains some pacing things that go on. I also believe that with this book, because it focuses on a main character who lives in Brooklyn, and the beautiful thing about this is that Alyssa Cole did so much amazing research in terms of trying to tell the reader exactly how gentrification has happened in Brooklyn, the history behind Brooklyn, how gentrification is currently happening in Brooklyn, like as we speak, and just the history of gentrification in general. And our main character is dealing with real life gentrification. She is actually like watching it happen because all of her neighbors seem to be disappearing, and then you have all of these white families and couples that are starting to move in, and you get towards the end and you figure out why. And I think what makes this book, for me, what made it a horror, not only just in pacing but also in terms of like the actual plot, was that this is stuff that I could see happening, or elements of stuff that happened in this book have already historically happened. So it's scary. It actually, for me, it was actually scary. And I also think too, going into this book, one of the things that I really enjoyed, and one thing that I wish that more people realize, is that the pacing is also off, because people say like, oh yeah, you know, the beginning happens really, really, really slow, and then all of a sudden it explodes at the end. And that's how gentrification works. So gentrification is not something that automatically explodes at once. And if my theory is right, I think what Alyssa Cole was attempting to do with this book is that she was trying to create pacing that was similar to the actual happenings of gentrification, where it starts off slow. You start to notice just small things happening here and there, and then all of a sudden you turn around and you blink and it's like, what happened? Like everything just happened so quickly. And that's how gentrification works. It looks like it's a slow process where you'll see like a condo pop up over here, this business randomly comes in, you'll see, you know, neighborhoods, slowly people start moving out, and then all of a sudden it's like it explodes and the entire community now looks completely different than what it did before. And I think that's what she was going for, which is, it's going to explain a lot of the pacing issues that probably a lot of people are having with this. But I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was great. I'm a huge fan of Alyssa Cole's writing. I've always liked Alyssa Cole's writing from other books that I've read by her, but this one definitely just, I mean, it took the cake. It took the cake for an interesting thriller slash horror debut from this author, who's traditionally writes romance, which I thought that this book definitely didn't need the romantic element. I think that was the biggest thing for me, is that she could have got rid of the romantic element. Wasn't really needed. All right, y'all, that is it. Those are my top SFF. Still was about to say, did I say F 3 times? Those are my top SFF, whatever, you get it, science fiction, fantasy, mystery, thriller, and horror. Oh my gosh, it was gonna take me forever to get that right. As always, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you're interested in seeing more content from me, click the subscribe button and hit that bell for notifications. If you're looking for ways to support my channel, the links will be down below in the description box. And if you're looking for ways to follow me on social media, those will be down in the description box as well. Oh my god, I can't talk today. This is crazy. All right, y'all, I'll be back with another video tomorrow. Bye.